Welcome to Veterinary Best Practices, a brand new podcast brought to you by Digitail, the all-in-one platform for better veterinary care. I'm your host, Dana Panduro, an onboarding specialist with over 20 years of in-clinic experience. Today, in our first episode, we're diving into two important and topical issues: compassion fatigue and artificial intelligence. I can think of no better person to have this conversation with than my friend Dr. Charles Hurty, who lives at the center of both of these topics. Clinically, he is a testament to his industry and beloved by both two-legged and four-legged friends. But what sets Dr. Hurty apart from the rest is his focus on what happens outside of the exam room. He is deeply invested in team culture, leadership, and the human side of veterinary medicine. He's credentialed in compassion fatigue and just finished his certification in global public health. Today, he is serving the Oregon veterinary community and traveling across the country to educate industry professionals on how to build sustainable and resilient veterinary careers. We're going to talk about his take on ethical AI use and how to recognize compassion fatigue in your team, what you can do to intervene, and how those two worlds might actually intersect. Let's dive into it.
I think that when I look at the veterinary ecosystem right now, there's a lot of downstream solutions, right? There's some peer groups, there's processes that seem to rely more on the individual finding a way to get help. And if we can move it upstream a little bit, I call it midstream, to put that clinic infrastructure in place. And this is what you're talking about as far as onboarding, critical point. And I think re-onboarding and having those check-ins, but having that culture within the clinic that really dedicates and honors this problem is absolutely critical.
I do want to dive in a little bit around your work in compassion fatigue in the veterinary space. And I know that you've talked on other podcasts about your story and your work with Alana and your work at Grove in identifying compassion fatigue and how you guys handled that as a hospital. What would you say compassion fatigue looks like, maybe on a team level, but also on an individual level that someone could see externally?
Yeah, so certainly compassion fatigue, very caregiving profession specific. And it's that, and we're starting to think like now what you're going to see along with compassion fatigue is you're going to start to see some terminology called empathy fatigue. And there's just been some recent work that's sort of teased out what part of the brain is engaged when we're having compassion and what part of the brain is engaged when we're being empathetic or showing empathy. And what they're finding is that the areas of the brain that get depleted are those parts of the brain that are more geared towards empathy. But I think you're going to see this sort of as a fine tuning of definitions, but certainly compassion fatigue, when we are exposed to high emotion repeatedly. And that describes a vet clinic, right? We're in a rapidly changing environment. There's emotions, there's happy emotions, there's sad emotions, extreme emotions. Sometimes we're operating in the middle, but oftentimes we don't get that opportunity to be in the middle of that emotional spectrum. And so when we're exposed to, say, repeated let's just say euthanasias or less ideal situations where cases might not go according to plan, or we're diagnosing cancer or something very quality of life affecting, that exposure, if we're not having some kind of outlet to recover and recharge, we're going to potentially experience compassion fatigue. And the thing about compassion fatigue, and we can compare that to burnout, but compassion fatigue in and of itself can actually come on pretty quickly. It can be a matter of days or even a single day where it's just been one of those days and you arrive at the end of that day just completely exhausted. And the fatigue, it takes on a physical, an emotional, mental, it operates on all of those different areas. And you can feel depleted, and so you will see this in a person as they may be a little more irritable or a little bit more emotional, maybe easy to cry or easy to get angry, some kind of social interaction that isn't what it used to be. So something changes in the way that individual is experiencing that day. And usually it's going to be in a place of more negative emotional feelings and the inability to process them because you've just been sort of bombarded over and over and over without the ability to take a break or release or recover. A team can certainly experience that. And that can look like less laughter. I mean, it can be a very subtle sign. I love being in the clinic and hearing, if I'm in the doc box, the office, and I hear laughter, or if I hear people really, just having a good time, that's a good sign. If you've got people who are easy to laugh, easy to share a good story, maybe having enough time to pull aside and have a conversation, I find that good. I know a lot of people find that irritable because like, well, they should be working, and I'm like, no, I like signs of laughter, sounds of laughter and that kind of thing. And clients can hear that. If you can hear that in the office, clients who might be waiting in an exam room, they can hear that too. And one of the most rewarding things for me in my practice is if I go into an exam room and there's a client who actually makes a comment about, wow, this is a happy place.
Such a win.
It feels so good, right? And you're like, wow, okay. And you need to, as a leader, you need to lean into that, right? Like, don't let that client get away from you. You need to ask them a few more questions and take that win. So lean into your wins. But yeah, I think that hearing those happy sounds and when compassion fatigue starts to take over, there is a tendency towards cynicism, a little bit more negativity. We're kind of in the trenches, so to speak. That's one of the expressions that we'll use. It's always good to have that kind of a phrase that someone can say on the team that immediately what that means. Like if I hear I'm in the trenches, that means that person needs some support. Like you have to listen to that and don't shine it on. And so if you're hearing, even if there's not a lot of laughter, even if it's just a lot of quiet, I think that sometimes that can be something to lean into and pay attention to.
Certainly not an official metric, but when I was in practice, I used the laughter metric. I especially knew who my loud laughers were, and I was like, oh, good, Bex is laughing today. They're leading the team. Like it was kind of a snowball effect. But I had also a treat dispenser, like we had in the exam rooms, but I would put a rotating candy in it. And you could see as it was going down. And I would say on most days it would go down by a fifth of the canister. On days where all of a sudden it dropped by a lot of times I felt like that was a stress response within my team. So I would make a point of getting out and seeing, are we having just a high stress case? Are we backed up? Are there ways that we could, and it was obviously, in management, you want to be getting up and going out on the floor regularly, but it was like I need to prioritize this because 5 people just grabbed a handful of M&Ms in a short period. And maybe I was Pavloving my team to eat chocolate when they were stressed. But I love the laughter metric. And I feel like that's such a wonderful compliment to receive when someone says, oh, you can tell people want to be here, or I love the environment here. I love the vibe here. And so I hope people who are receiving that feedback take a moment to appreciate the work. That doesn't happen in a vacuum or by accident. That speaks volumes about the culture that you're building in that practice.
Yeah, well, I love the treat depletion metric that you use. I mean, these are different types of things that can really be useful on the front line for people and leaders and practices to gauge things. So I love that. I never even thought about that as a thing, but good kudos to you for paying attention to what happens with the level of the treats. I think that's awesome.
I'm a hangry, low blood sugar person, so I was one of those, like the snacks were always well stocked, and I always made sure outside of the candy that there were like cheese and fruit and crackers or something, because we all get busy, we all face stress. Doing that while you're low blood sugar, it's just a recipe for disaster. So it was kind of an evolution of our culture. We had a whole cheese culture thing at TVH. I'm curious, if you're, as a leader, how do you initiate a conversation with someone to check in? Because I know sometimes we don't have the internal awareness when we're struggling, and it can take a trusted person in a non-confrontational way to say, hey, are you doing okay? Because I'm noticing these things. But that's kind of a daunting conversation to have. Do you have recommendations on how to approach someone, and what's a way to do that that's going to be well received?
Yeah, well, I think that what you're leaning into here is another observation skill, and that is something that leadership really needs to do. They need to listen, and not just listen and be observant, but also have some ideas in place for action, right? And so, if you, like you just said, when one of your team members is happy and laughing and affecting the team in a positive way. And if you're checking in on that situation and that person is not, in their normal way, then yeah, okay, maybe something's going on. And I think that that's a cue that a lot of people, the leadership team and practices need to pay attention to. Sometimes it's obvious, like that person's very quiet, or it may not be as obvious. But I think that really kind of understanding some body language that might be expressed. I can think of an example of we had a technician assistant who was like always a very happy, go lucky, serve the client kind of person. And then suddenly she was really irritable. Like, I'm like, whoa, okay, that was not a normal expression. And so in that scenario, rather than, this happened in our pharmacy area, in front of everybody and whatnot, just sort of real subtly, get their attention and say, hey, can we have a quick conversation? Or even now you can text them, right? This is a safe place. You can talk to me. I'll listen, and let's see if we can figure a few things out. Because oftentimes people just need a little validation. They need to be heard, just like our clients, right? I mean, that's, their fears and concerns need to be validated, and the experiences and the feelings of our team members need to be validated as well.
And that's a good training segue, because I feel like it's much more common maybe within a culture to at a veterinary clinic to identify, hey, we're not judgmental. So if someone has financial restrictions on affording care for their pet, we're going to find a compassionate way to meet them where they are. We're going to find a treatment plan that cares for them as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've kind of created that conversation, now I need you to expand that to yourself, to your team. How can we approach each other in a non-judgmental way? Because it's so easy. I feel like it's with all these kind of empathetic givers that find themselves in veterinary medicine, where it's like, oh, we want to go the extra mile for the client. We want to, and then I'm like, yeah, and what are we doing for yourself? How are we taking care of yourself? So it creates like a little bit of a bridge. So you buy in with the concept, and then it's like, okay, and now I want you to share that with your coworkers. If they're having a bad day, know them well enough to say, hey, do you need to talk? Or, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
That's, you seem a little off today. Yeah. And I guess from personal experience, I've been relieved if I've been struggling and maybe not identifying it for myself, to have someone who is non-judgmentally saying, hey, I know you, and this seems off. Are you okay? It's like almost like a release, like, oh, you know what, you're right. I've been holding this inside and it's so heavy. And I'm happy to someone else sees it and maybe can help me with it.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. I think that that's a critical point. And one of the things that when we have our team meetings, and one of the headers for our clinic at the top is about compassion for our patients and our clients. But actually, right before I even put patients and clients on that, it's for ourselves and our team members and our clients and our patients. Because, like you said, if you're not there, or there's something that's heavy, and you're not able to get past it, what's the downstream effect of that? Well, you could pull the team into that, even inadvertently or purposefully, if you go down that path. But the
yes.
patient outcome might be less, and the client experience might be less than ideal. And we've missed now an opportunity to educate a client in a very meaningful way. And will that patient get the preventative care or the types of services that they need to be healthy and maintain that human-animal bond? if you can really think downstream, if we're not taking care of ourselves in that caregiving capacity, it affects uh, the entire flow of the whole workflow.
Oh, yeah, I mean, catastrophic thinking, hopefully for the better, but we need good people in this industry with long careers. So if prioritizing our care as a hospital, as a industry, and on an individual level allows good, compassionate people to stay in this field for a 30, 40-year career versus feeling overwhelmed and burning out after 5 years, that's what
Hmm.
we need to prioritize. When you put it in that kind of term, like who's not here because they care for patients and want to improve patient care, who's not here because they want to see this industry grow and flourish. And when you put it in that, how can you not prioritize caring for our team, caring for
Right,
ourselves?
right.
So I love that. What are some, I guess I want to rewind really quickly. What is a very simple way to discern between burnout and compassion fatigue? Because I think they are used interchangeably and maybe are symptoms of a similar pattern, but are not, they are distinctly different.
Yeah. So I think I would think about compassion fatigue in that very caregiving function. So we don't really see compassion fatigue happening in industries or different careers where there isn't a huge caregiving component. So thinking about burnout, burnout really comes from, it is a workplace term and it can happen in any workplace. And so it tends to be more based on the systems and the different parts of a workplace and things that are not happening in a workplace. Compassion fatigue, repeated compassion fatigue, and prolonged compassion fatigue can certainly contribute to the state of burnout. But burnout is, it's physical, it's emotional, it's mental. And what it ultimately boils down to is we've lost our purpose and we've lost our sense of self. So you find that folks feel trapped. This is not surviving. Burnout is really a state of suffering. It is not something that happens instantaneously. It's from repeated exposure to distress, high emotions without any ability to recover. So the classic example is you come into the job, you think you're going to, be able to function at a super high level and you can stay late every day and you can make all those phone calls, you can do all those medical records, and you can spend all that time. You can take your work home and you can get online and work until 1 a.m. And then it starts to kind of fall apart a bit because you're not really
Yeah.
taking any sort of time for yourself. And then you go back to work thinking, okay, I'm going to be ready to rock and roll again. But you're up till 2 a.m. doing medical records, and then the whole day starts again. And now you've got like a euthanasia, another serious case, a hospitalized case, and you're plugging away. And over time, you really start to just not feel present anymore. Like some might
Mm-hmm.
say that, just emotionally they're numb.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like going to work, but you're kind of just going through the motions. But you're in a very slippery place, a very fragile spot from, the data that continues to come out is that in this industry, it's not just veterinarians, it's our licensed veterinary technicians, it's our CSRs and our tech assistants. Everybody who's a member of that team is susceptible to burnout if we're not really paying attention to it. And we know that the studies are showing, depending on the study that you read, 50 to 80% a level of
Yeah.
burnout is happening. And that number to me is just tremendous. It also is found in our human healthcare colleagues. And so again, this high caregiving, high emotional situations and careers, we're more susceptible. And I think that's one thing to point out is that in the veterinary profession, when we compare ourselves to the general population, our burnout rates are way higher than the general population. And I think that one thing that we have done in this field, and we need to find ways to change this, is we're not really letting people know that that's a thing when they join the
Yeah.
veterinary profession. I'm not trying to scare anybody away, but it is a risk, right? It's an occupational
Oh, yeah.
risk. And we spend so much
To the
time protecting our physical bodies from dangerous situations and we get training on that. But honestly, we don't get a lot of training when it comes to the psychological impact of what we're going to experience. And that's where we really need to find some upstream solutions to making sure that people know how to cope and deal and recognize that these things are happening.
Yeah, I'm passionate about this specifically with our early career veterinarians, and
Hmm.
I've seen more data specifically around DVMs, but I would assume that it mirrors in all roles. It's like those first 5 years in the veterinary industry are difficult, and I think the most recent study I looked at was talking about it was calling it through the lens of like career satisfaction or job satisfaction,
Hmm.
and it was like
Yeah,
the
sure.
first 3 years just feeling less and less satisfied, less and less engaged, less and less confident in their career path. And then there was some dissipation of that after um around year 5. But I mean, that's not what we want. It is if you can survive, if we can separate, our whoever can stuff it down or thrive and figure out how to manage it for themselves, like that they then
Yeah.
eventually, become out of it. We need to be intentional around that. And so I would love to see more education in university spaces and career programs, and then just more awareness at a hospital and industry level, particularly when we're welcoming new people into the industry, on what supports that we can create for them, checking in, not just like, are you ramping production? Are you expanding your skills as a DVM? But also like, how are you clocking off? Are you answering your phone when you're not here? When you're not here, are you doing notes at home? Are you charting at home? I'm gonna IP whitelist you, like for yourself. Those would maybe be extreme examples, but we come up with ramp plans and onboarding plans, and part of that needs to be helping, especially early career veterinary industry professionals, navigate how they're going to interact with this space to counteract the constant pull to just dive in and lose yourself in the
Yeah.
work.
You mentioned a really great example of how to approach this. You mentioned education. And I think that, when we're looking at solutions for this kind of thing, we have to go as far upstream as we can. I think that when I look at the veterinary ecosystem right now, there's a lot of downstream solutions, right? There's some peer groups, there's processes that seem to rely more on the individual finding a way to get help. And if we can move it upstream a little bit, I call it midstream, like put that clinic infrastructure in place. And this is what you're talking about as far as onboarding,
Yeah.
critical point. And I think re-onboarding and having those check-ins, but having that culture within the clinic that really dedicates and honors this problem is absolutely critical. But then going even further upstream, like you mentioned, all of those training pipelines, the technician schools, looking at the veterinary education, and really putting in place just some foundational language on mental health literacy, boundaries, what is burnout, how do you know when it's happening, what kind of self-assessment tools are available. We have so many technological innovations now that we can put a self-eval app right on someone's phone that they can periodically check in with and say, whoa, okay, there's some things happening here. This is not the way I was answering these questions, 4 or 5 months ago. And so
Yes.
there's a lot of support. And if you just give people the vocab, some of that literacy, let them know some of the occupational risks, and they go into it with that foundation, then your midstream clinic stuff, they're going to know why you're doing that, right? I mean, they're going to say, okay, this, or even if you're going into a clinic to say, okay, where am I going to work? Like, okay, here's a clinic that is like really geared up to like make sure that I'm taken care of. And they have laugh metrics and they have a treat jar metric that they check
Yeah.
into. That's amazing. And they all wear swag and they check in with each other and they do, a lot of self-care stuff versus like, you go to a clinic and hopefully they're upfront with it, but hey, we're just, you got to get the feel, right?
And not that we should need to make a financial argument for why people should be doing this, but you talk about recruiting. So hot right now. Difficult to find DVMs. I've had some not upbeat conversations during interview processes that led to some really good bonds, and I just inviting the difficult questions. How are you going to support me as I start my career or as I further my career? What does this hospital do to encourage employee engagement outside of our, like, those are questions that we should be inviting on the hospital level, and we should have an onboarding plan. And you're going to find people want to work, are more excited and will work longer, reducing turnover in those environments that have those systems in place. I guess, kind of circling back, burnout seems very structural, and as a manager I can think of some low-hanging fruit, making sure that we're checking in after busy times, setting non-production, maybe like personal life goals that I can support them with as a manager to encourage them with work-life balance, not texting or reaching out to employees after work hours. There's a lot of things that we can do to mitigate or at least not reinforce some of the industrial pressures. But when it comes to compassion fatigue, I don't know how to take the high emotions out of medicine, or how to be a euthanasia-free hospital, or a hospital that never has a heightened customer because they're dealing with their own emotional burdens. How can we support these less, I guess, more of the compassion fatigue aspects of these on a hospital level? They're a little trickier for me to thumb down.
Yeah, well, I think simply, well, there's some really easy things I think that we can
Okay.
do to improve that. And I think just having leadership define like say, hey, we all work in a pretty wild place. Like, this is a magical place. Let's make it a magical place. But hey, guys, this is high emotion, and you're gonna go through a lot of different emotions, and you need to one, just recognize that that's going to happen and let people know that you recognize that. So you're going to be that very caring leader. And I think just allowing people the ability to communicate or to check in on how they are experiencing that day. There are some things I think leaders can do, when we're looking at that schedule. And if you've got a veterinarian who is signed up for, hopefully not, but it does happen, 4, 5, 6 euthanasias that day. That's
December.
something that before that maybe even happens, that's something to take note of and to check in with that person, because if they are experiencing that, they need to have somebody thinking about them in a positive way, in a supportive way. Hey, what do you need? Like, do you need an extra half hour of time to just go decompress after this? Or let's figure out how to do this. Or was this too much? Like, and be honest, like, be honest with me. I'm listening because I want to act on what you tell me. Was that too much? And if they're saying yes, as leaders, we need to make some adjustments there. I think also there's actually a science to appreciation. And what I mean by that is just recognizing somebody's good work or recognizing what they've experienced that day. Now, they don't need to be in a state of compassion fatigue. They could be on cloud nine, having just worked with a great case and their favorite client. But if you walk up to them and say, gosh, I really appreciate your attitude today. It's awesome. You're doing so great. That person, you're there. If you're doing that on a regular basis, that person has an 80% more likely to stay and not leave a business. Now, that's not just veterinary medicine, that's across everywhere. There's actually this weird paper, and I can't quote it specifically, but it was something like, even if you yelled at somebody, they feel 30% better, that like, hey, they even know I'm alive. Like, I didn't even know that they
The
knew I was here. So
the dog that would
recognizing
rather be
people in this,
hit than ignored, so to speak.
right. But if we just recognize people and show that gratitude and that appreciation on a regular basis, and I think for a leader and really just a team member in general, I love it when my team members tell each other that they're doing a great job. I mean, that is to me a huge
Hmm.
win because that's somebody feeling safe enough to do that and recognize their coworker in that way. And so appreciation goes a long way. And as a leader, I think even if it doesn't come natural, even before you walk into the building, just take 2 minutes in your car and say like, okay, I'm going to walk in the room. I'm going to say good morning and be, pretty positive to everybody. And then I'm going to make sure by noon that I'm going to tell 3 people or 4 people that I appreciate their work today. The recharge of the battery on that is tremendous. And the science is there. This is like peer reviewed stuff. Um,
Love it.
uh, and in our practice we do have some call outs that we call them kudos. I think
Hmm.
some of the people in our practice call them cujos, but these are
Good job.
just little slips of paper, and in it you write their name down and your name down, and give them some appreciation for what they did, and you put that in their wall pocket, and then they find that kind of randomly and feel really good about that. And then collectively those things get added up at the end of a month, and we have a team member of the month. So
Love that.
appreciation goes a long way. And the other thing that I feel we can do to get in front of compassion fatigue and that high emotion, we're going to experience the emotions, and we should. We're human beings, and we don't want to run away from how we're feeling. We need to appreciate what we're feeling. But one thing that we can do is really make sure that people are taking their breaks. And so we have a program within our clinic called the Take a Break Initiative. We call it TABI. And this is
Cute.
also very well understood and studied and peer reviewed. A 10 to 15-minute break within 2 hours of walking in the building is one of the most impactful things that you can do for a person to end their day in a good way. But then
Hmm.
also protecting their lunch. Everybody should have a 1 hour lunch, and they need to go on it. And that
Yes.
in our industry, that is like a really hard thing to do, but it needs to happen. And we also frame this as there should be no break shamers, and you should
No.
have no lunch guilt.
My last question kind of on this topic is I recently read it's When We're in Charge, which is a leadership guide for next generation leaders. And she really frames it in the like millennial Gen Z boomer thing, which I would cast aside. I thought it was an interesting thought experiment on how leadership styles are kind of changing. But one of the points that she ruminates on is setting expectations and boundaries in what we can provide as a manager. It feels like because our workplaces occupy so much of our physical and mental space that we kind of look to our workplaces for a lot of solutions. So, within the context of compassion fatigue in veterinary medicine, are there limitations to what we should be taking on as a leadership, as a leader in a hospital, as a manager? What is a fair balance on what we can provide ownership in, and how can we communicate that to our teams in a sympathetic way?
Yeah, so like have like leadership boundaries, like having not taking on too much, because I mean the person who's taking all this
Oh,
on
yeah.
can certainly burn out. They're susceptible to burnout too. We know that. Um,
Been there.
yeah,
And I think we've all, or most of us who've been in leadership position, have found ourselves on, it's going to flippantly kind of call it a side quest of like helping someone access housing, helping someone through a breakup, helping someone
gotcha.
things that we're holistic people. We realize that it all impacts our work, and we want to honor and create space for the totality that is that person. But is there a limit
Yeah.
to with what we should be engaging in a workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I do feel that sometimes as a leader, if it's feeling, let's not say it's feeling wrong, but if you're feeling like you are going too far, or you're going like finding housing. Now that's a situation. We'll just use that example. I mean, in our neck of the woods, housing is a huge deal. So we are all
It's a
always
huge deal.
on for helping to find housing. But that's just, I think that's just it's a baseline. But yeah, I think if you were finding out that someone was having troubles at home that were certainly affecting their work in the clinic, but you're not going to solve everybody's, all their issues. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
would say that there is a shift in mindset for what employees are expecting these days.
Mm-hmm.
The legacy thinking is that well-being and a healthy workplace might be really geared towards the individual or the individuals within that workplace. And now we do know that there is a forward thinking employees do see the employer as a significant influence on not only the employees well-being but also the well-being of like their dependents and such. And so I feel that there is an opportunity for us to really look at the benefits packages. I know maybe that wasn't the angle you were expecting
No, I'm here
there,
for it.
but I do feel like there are some really interesting ways to get employees, team members, different forms of support through different types of benefits that we have available. I'll use the example, I'll pick on the EAP or the Employee
I was going to
Assistance
say
Program.
EAP. It's everyone should have it. It's a lower cost to the clinic, and the benefits are numerous.
They are, and I think that what happens with EAP, at least in the setting of mental health, a lot of people, there's this like stigma about asking for help, and so we don't see the EAPs used very often. I think like the use rate is like 2 to 5%, but it speaks to your other idea about onboarding. So like when someone is joining the practice, they need to know what that is, and that it's not just a mental health. It's for elder care, financial supports, all types of different services are available through the EAP. Now, is that a benefit that is useful for our younger employees? Is it something that's better for you mentioned, the boomers and Gen X and whatnot? It may not
Yeah.
be a benefit that's useful to everybody. So I really think I think we can prop up the EAP on some level, but I think there's also an opportunity to look at some other types of benefits, looking at some of these different apps and different companies that function in, say, a well-being space. We have all types of different companies emerging right now that are just looking to provide the services that we're talking about. So I think that having the ability to talk about what's available to a team member is critical, because you might not
Mm-hmm.
have in your toolbox the different types of experience and language to help somebody who is having XYZ problem at home, but you do have access to an EAP program, and spending some additional time explaining what that is and say, hey, this could be very useful. And if it's not the place for utility in your situation, they probably can help find what you need, or they will direct you to the next place. And I think the knowing about EAPs specifically, I think one of the best things that a leader can do is hold a team member's hand while they navigate that process. So I don't think that's outside of the job description, because
Yeah.
if you can't help them, but you can help them take this step. And I think it's taking that step or dialing that phone number or hitting the button. That's what they have a hard time doing. So if you can build the trust with that person who's having an issue, I don't think you're going to overextend into their private life, but you can certainly say, I'm here to help you do this. Let's move forward together. And so looking at all those words left unsaid, if we can frame it as, man, this is going to really improve things if I can approach this situation and at least just open a dialogue, you're going to get towards hopefully some resolution, and a more connected experience.
I agree. And just, I guess, a shout out to anyone listening, or a challenge. If you have EAP available to your team, call the number yourself and just go through that process. They're very nice people. And just kind of anecdotally, I had I think one of the better parts of my career was when I had an employee, because I was trying to be transparent enough at some point to say, like, I want to let you guys know that, I was struggling and I reached out and I used this, and I just want to remind you guys that this exists. And we saw our utilization go up, because the way my EAP communicates is they tell us what percentage of our employees are using resources, but never who or what they were using. That utilization went up, and then months later I had someone who came to me and said, "Hey, you mentioned starting therapy and using EAP. I've now been doing it for several months, and I'm changing some major things in my life, and I want to thank you for doing that." So in the moment, I didn't have an agenda, or it was literally like a line item on a meeting, but it created that normalization and that doorway for people to go. It's not just the card that we hand out when we're having a bad day, or the magnet that's on the fridge. Like, these are things that people in my community are using, and they're not getting their hair burned off. Like, it's safe. I can reach out to these resources too.
I think that's a great idea for folks who are in that position to hand out that EAP call them number. I think that's a fantastic recommendation, just so they know what it is, right?
So looking at, you were mentioning there's some more technologies and better applications of technology that can help in this space. We're very AI forward here at Digitail. Do you have any examples of concrete platforms or groups that are using AI in a progressive way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Digitails is doing in the platform that you guys have created is tremendous. I mean, you're embracing the AI technology, and I mean, I am certainly an early adopter of the AI medical record, SOAP generation. And I've used a lot of different programs for that. And I would say, and I don't want to sound like I'm overstating this, but I really truly believe this, that the medical record documentation function and the client phone call function for just note taking has changed my life as a veterinarian. And, I've been in the field for 24 years, and I've seen a lot of different things. So one of my first jobs, the medical records were 3x5-inch note cards.
Yes,
And
Rolodexes.
I'm like, what is this? Like, I've never even thought about or considered, and so then, written medical records, and then electronic medical record. And electronic medical records, sort of like a love-hate relationship. Yes, you can read it, but oh my gosh, it takes so long to generate these records, and you can template and template and template. But, it's like you'd end your shift and then the day began again. You had to do all your medical record documentation. You had to get to your phone calls. You had to do all your notes. It would be 3-4 hours of additional work if you couldn't, and oftentimes you just can't keep up with it during the workflow, because there's too much going on. But having the ability to do the ambient AI recording, to create the SOAP notes, and to be able to template that up into a very specific format, and to have that integrate, with the practice management software, it's given me personally, I think, hours in a day. And it used to be, the dialogue that I would talk to my team about, in terms of just us being busy, is like, we would have these meetings. Like, I'm like, where can we find minutes in our day to make changes to make us a little bit more efficient, and not efficient to, make more money. It was efficiency for me was, I want to find time for you all to be able to be creative, be innovative, think about solutions, take your breaks, and really enjoy what you're doing, and not just run through your day and then be exhausted, right? But in a matter of months after adoption, it was like we went from minutes to finding hours. And the impact on one's quality of life is tremendous. And so I'm a big fan of that kind of technology. And I find that there is a really key connection to be made between giving that time back to a person and having that person then be able to get home to family, get to the gym, go for a walk, hang out with your own animals, your kids,
Yes.
and just finding that better balance in your life. So I have really leaned into the AI driven technology that way, and it's honestly, I mean, I guess if we want to go and talk about AI a little bit, I mean, we certainly can
Yeah.
do that, but even just radiology,
Mm-hmm.
looking at different technologies there. And on the human side, I've just completed a global public health program, and I was the only veterinarian in that field, in that group, in the cohort, and it was all, MDs and whatnot, and policymakers all over the world. It was really, really incredible. But there was a big chunk of this was dedicated to AI and how it's integrating into public health and healthcare. And I was surprised to learn that a lot of the radiology on the human side, like it's being all filtered through AI on that side.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see that be something that becomes more readily adopted on the vet side. I think there was some reluctance with some of the early radiology programs, but now the deep learning models are pretty profoundly better than anything we've ever seen in the past. And so, but even diagnostics in the clinic, the new equipment from, Zoetis and IDEX, looking at cytologies and fecal analyses and urinalyses in clinic, better outcomes for patients, right? We get these answers quicker. We can get interventions going at a much quicker. So our outcomes for our patients are better and our client experiences are better. So I'm a big fan of looking at technology, and I think too one of the pillars that we need to be looking at is just literacy of
Mm-hmm.
technology in our industry. And
Yeah.
I think we've been a little technology averse, adverse in vet med. I think we see different things, but we're pretty slow in my opinion. And it's just the technology changes are happening so rapidly now that in order to be out in front and part of the conversation, really teaching technology literacy is a big part of what we're experiencing right now.
Yes, I agree. I do pick up on a certain level of hesitancy within AI adoption. I think the words AI
Hmm.
can sometimes feel threatening or big. I guess what would be two parts? Are there spaces that you never want to see AI that we need to corral it? And then what would you say to folks that are reluctant to adopt AI just because of that fear of the unknown or that newness of it?
Yeah. So I think in terms of adopting it, I think one of the ideas that get thrown out there is that the AI is going to take over all the medical decisions. And I think people also worry that their ability to think through the problems might change. But I think the biggest concern that I hear is that, well, I don't want AI doing all my medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, the way that I approach that is, well, I utilize the AI as a tool to accomplish a task that's a very repetitive task in my day. And so these very labor time consuming tasks of medical record generation, to me, when I can ask the AI to do that, I'm not asking it to make clinical decisions for me. I'm just asking it to take my words and my brain that I, just kind of put out into the universe during a physical exam or an appointment, and to put it on paper for me so that I can then take a look at that and make sure that, you know, I did say those things. And so I also say
Yeah,
there's a filter, right? There's a human filter, and I believe in that human filter because, we hear about AI hallucinations and they get some words
happens.
wrong. Yeah, those things are going to happen, but it takes me like 30 seconds to find that and fix that. And it also allows me to subtract or augment if I'm the filter. And so the hours spent typing, I'll even say that when I'm looking at some of my notes, I'm like, oh yeah, I did say that. And but it doesn't come up with you could ask it to come up with rule outs, and you could ask it to come up with different, a bunch of differentials, but that's not really how I utilize it. And honestly, if you were asking it to come up with some different differentials beyond your main idea, which you've communicated, it might actually pull up an answer that says, oh my gosh, I really need to think about that. And so it can capture some of the cognitive misses that we might make, but it's not making decisions. So if it came up with something and you felt, oh, that's really interesting, well, it's your decision to either pursue that or not. And so it's not dictating what you do, but it's helping you be more effective. The other part of it that I really like, so I'm an extroverted person, and I really like talking to my clients. And I have seen this, and I can tell you that this is a very real experience for me, is I went from trying to take notes on paper that I would then go, whatever, type in or have my technician type it in. I don't even worry about that anymore. I might give myself a buzzword here and there just to focus my thought process, because that's my old workflow. But I connect to the client better. And so if I'm not thinking about, oh my gosh, I got to generate this medical record, I'm creating an experience for that client. I'm connecting to the client. They're getting a better education when it comes to a problem that we're addressing. And I get to actually spend more time with the patient and hands-on. And I love my patients. I mean, there's a million pictures of me holding little dogs. I love little dogs. And the more time I get to do that in a room with a person and a patient, the better. And I find that when I'm leaning on the ambient medical record technology, I'm in there with that person, not thinking about my medical record. And to me, that's one of the biggest rewards. I mean, just think of, because they're now adopting this ambient technology in human healthcare. And I can track my appointments with my physician, and it's gone from her just looking at the computer and typing while I'm sitting there, not connecting, to having a virtual assistant in some other state who I would say hi to, which then made the connection a little bit better, to using the ambient AI. And the experience for me as a patient is better. And I think we routinely hear that from patients that are surveyed, is that when there's that ability to show compassion and connection, the patient experience is so much better.
So if you had a magic wand, where would you want to see AI going next, specifically in veterinary medicine?
Yeah. So this is something I've thought about for a while. And now, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility to actually have an AI assistant or agent that's a member of the team. And what I mean by that is, here's an example. If you've got a client in an exam room and the technician's done their thing, the tech assistant, the veterinarian's been in, now we've got some downtime. Maybe we're reading a cytology, or AI is reading a cytology, or we're doing something with some blood work, and the client's in that room. Well, that client, what are they doing in that room? They're on their cell phone. So why can't we have a screen in a room that's an AI agent that's actually part of our caregiving team, answering questions for that person in the room? Why can't we pull Taylor Swift music up and play something relaxing? Right. Play something relaxing for that client. And then, and the AI could even remember, like, they come back next week, like, hey, you want to listen to some Taylor Swift again? Or, hey, like, you know what? We're doing ear stuff, right? Let me walk you through how to clean ears. Or, how are you feeling about your appointment today? I mean, people talk to their chatbots now, right? I mean, I see that as a function that can save, again, a lot more time. Now, it doesn't have to end there. Like, they can say, are you satisfied with your explanation on cleaning a dog's ears through this video? And I'll show you how to do it. And and that may be it. And so you've saved now the technician some time on doing that ear cleaning, or whatever the task might be, or how to pill your cat, maybe the AI agent. Because now it's like, I mean, think about it. You can do the explanation, which is great, and that's still a default. But a lot of times we're sending someone to a video on YouTube on how to do sub-Q fluids in your cat. Well, what if you actually had a clinic generated, approved AI agent that they could bring up at home? You click on the link on your email and it will say, hey, let's talk about how to give, Violet sub-Q fluids again. Do you have any questions? I mean, that to me seems like a very powerful thing. And it may not be something that we're ready for right now, but I feel like that could be something that really functions in the future once the technology is even better and better and people are more accepting of that kind of interaction.
And the proactiveness of AI too. So we could say, hey, we have a newly diagnosed diabetic. Let's go check in 48 hours and say, do we need to review how we're taking like a glucose check? We just have a couple minutes, so I want to end. I always want to end with something tangible for our listeners. So I'd love to do some tactical takeaways. Do you have, what would be 3 actionable steps that our listeners could take to either better integrate AI into their practice, or if you want a bonus, integrate AI to address issues of compassion fatigue in practice?
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of integrating AI, first thing would be to, I think, survey your team. What do they know about it? Just get some baseline information. Are people scared of it? Are people like, why haven't we done it yet? Or are people using it already? Like, they already are. So kind of get to figure out, like, what's your landscape look like? And that's pretty easy. Something else a leadership team should do is look into your state and federal, get us familiar with the state and federal laws related to recording people. Like, who do you have to notify and in what way? That's I think that's some early adoption stuff that that's information that's really important. So you're not breaking the law. You don't want to record somebody, let alone their child that might be in the room. There's a whole lot of federal laws about that. So know who you have to ask in the room if it's okay, or if you have to ask if it's okay, because each state is different. So some real basic, who's literate, who's scared, what are the laws? And if you do have some folks who are into it, get them using it and create a couple metrics, just easy metrics. I want you to kind of tell me, score how you're feeling about it. What's the product look like? Meaning like the notes. And then how much time do you think is being saved? So those are some real quick and easy. And then if they're collecting that data, you can bring that back to the team and say, hey, Alana was using this and she saved 6 hours last week using AI. So, let's talk about that and then figure out how to navigate forward. Because I do think there is some reluctance. And I guess the other, just as an aside, the other part of the reluctance is understanding the energy consumption, right? I think that there's a lot of ideas out there about we're affecting the significant energy draw by using the AI technology. And this AI technology is a little different in terms of, it's not ChatGPT necessarily. But I think that that's another part that companies need to be prepared for as well in terms of answering those questions.
Absolutely.
So,
and we deserve innovation on those fronts.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of utilizing AI in the clinic for burnout is just really leaning into the amount of time that is saved, and then really kind of showing folks how that time can be better spent. And if you're saying because I think a lot of people I've also heard well, you want us to just have more time to see more patients. And the idea is not, we definitely want to help as many patients as we can, But this is where the conversation about boundaries comes into play, and burnout and being resilient. And so we really want to use that time in an effective way. And you're not pushing this to get more out of them. You're really kind of introducing this idea to enrich their experience within the clinic, and to, move forward as a group in a way that we all feel good about. I mean, so that's my take.
I love that. Do you have 2 tools or resources that people can look to for guidance on some of the topics that we discussed today?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the material coming from, like if you looked up Adam Grant and just looked up all of his stuff, there's some really interesting stuff there. I would also direct people towards a book. I'm not going to have the author's name at my fingertips here, but Compassionomics is a great book about it's compassion in the human healthcare field, but how compassionate acts, when we really lean into those, patients have better outcomes, but you also have that caregiver high from it. And so that's a really interesting book to pick up. And I'm always a huge fan of anybody who can connect with Brene Brown's material, any of her podcast material. I have her books on audio, and I play those not every day, but a lot, because Dare to Lead is just such a great resource. And we utilize, if you looked at TED for different types of TED Talks, I mean, this is a little leadership tidbit, and depending on how much time you have or running appointments, or running your team meetings, I like to find work related TED Talks. They're usually like 10 or 11 minutes long, and I'll share those with the team. Sometimes we'll play those at a team meeting, or we'll just share them on a Slack app. Like, hey guys, check this out. This is like the meaning of work and different things like that. So I really like bringing in other perspectives for people to kind of digest and think about, rather than just hearing me or Alana or Dr. Fitzgerald talk, So, and I think the team likes that too.
Give us an opportunity to listen to some Taylor Swift or platform Brene Brown,
That's right. Oh yeah. There's always Taylor Swift. Have karaoke
There's
parties.
Always...
That's
That's it. That's the key takeaway. Use AI so you have more time for Taylor Swift karaoke.
That's it. I like to share this, because I think this actually got some people on stage at our last karaoke party. Is karaoke, it is an opportunity to be extremely vulnerable, but it's also an opportunity for your people to show you complete support for doing that, whatever it is, on stage. And so there's this it's like this great leadership exercise and team building thing. And everybody goes in there with support and cheering, and you're vulnerable, but you're getting support. It's great. It's great. And that's become sort of our regular deal. So if you never have done a karaoke party, I would recommend everybody check it out.
Perfect. Karaoke parties. Well, I'm going to end us on that high note, if you will. Thank you so much for your time. This was such a wonderful discussion. I'm hoping that you and I can have many more, because this was useful and insightful and vulnerable, and I really appreciate your time and expertise.
Hey, I appreciate you, and I'm happy to talk with you whenever you want to talk, Dana.
That's a wrap on our first ever episode of Veterinary Best Practices. A huge thank you to Dr. Hurty for spending time with us and giving us his practical insights on both the human and technological sides of veterinary medicine. For more thoughtful conversations and industry insights, please join us for future episodes. In the meantime, check out our website, digitail.com, for more clinical resources and supports. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you on the next episode of Veterinary Best Practices.